Tonight we are live in Austin, Texas, where the Civil Rights Summit honoring the signing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 in its second day, the 50th anniversary they honor this week. Our senior political correspondent Andrew Whitman, he'll join us live from Austin with a look at today's tribute surrounding both pro sports and the role they played in social change. Today, the nation pauses as we honor the 3 sergeants who lost their lives in last week's shooting at Fort Hood. The Iraq War veteran who committed the crimes was being evaluated for PTSD. Is the military doing enough here to help the men and women who serve? And a Brooklyn man wrongfully convicted of murder and jailed for 24 years finally walks free, and it's all thanks to his attorneys and the Brooklyn DA's conviction review unit. His case just one of many. The questions are stacking up as the Brooklyn DA's office as to why there are many questions still unanswered right now, with many cases for people who went behind bars. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French, and thank you so much for joining us this Wednesday evening, April 9th. And tonight, we begin at Fort Hood. That is where President Obama grieved with family members of the victims who were killed in last week's shooting at the military base. Sergeants Timothy Owens, Carlos Lizani Rodriguez, and Daniel Ferguson, they died at the hands of Army Specialist Ivan Lopez. That's after authorities say he brought a gun onto the base and opened fire following an argument. He then turned the gun on himself.
And soldiers they became, their sense of service and their patriotism. So much of that came from you. You gave your sons to America. And just as you will honor them always, so too will the nation that they served.
Military officials say that Lopez, who served in Iraq, was being evaluated for PTSD before that attack. And according to the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans Association of America, we've worked with here extensively over the years, at least 20% of veterans who served in Iraq or Afghanistan suffer from PTSD or depression. Now, those who served in Iraq or Afghanistan also more likely to suffer from post-traumatic stress when compared to those who served in other conflicts. Now, 50% of those suffering from PTSD do not, in fact, seek treatment. And a Washington Post poll shows nearly 60% of veterans say that the VA is only doing a fair or poor job in addressing the problems faced by vets. Half say the military not doing enough to help this population transition to civilian life. And I want to bring in our panel tonight. As always, I'm joined by Dominic Carter, of course, political journalist and author. And we're joined on set by Dr. Leslie Green, who is a chief psychologist for the PTSD residential program at the VA in Hudson Valley, and also David Jones, Bronze Star recipient, served in Desert Storm and Operation Provide Hope. Gentlemen, welcome, and thank you again for your service. We see the tragedy that happened at Fort Hood again, and the one thing you get from a lot of the conversation, we've talked about PTSD on this program, is 2 constant concerns. One is that one size does not fit all, and also that there's a stigma attached for many who come to seek help. And you are a person who sits down with this population, so it's not anecdotal numbers, you put faces and names to it. Talk about what you've seen here in the last decade of a population that has come to you. And we've heard from a lot of folks, it's such a large population with so many varying needs. The military just wasn't equipped to deal with this population when they came back in such big numbers.
Well, the VA has ratcheted up its efforts for outreach. They've provided special suicide hotlines. They have opportunities to reach out. They go to the college campuses, the college universities. But the PTSD patients, there's 2 issues. I think you brought up. One is the stigma. I think even with all the exposure that you've had, people still don't want to seek mental health treatment. And I think the other issue is post-traumatic stress disorder, unlike a physical injury where they know they have a wound, they know they have an injury, they don't realize they have post-traumatic stress disorder. There's an array of symptoms that they experience. They may not sleep well, they may have nightmares, they may be reimagining the events, there's high anxiety, but they don't put it all together as PTSD. When the veterans come home, they want to resume their life. They want to continue with their jobs. They're not looking to get treatment, and they don't even realize what's happening to them until usually they begin to develop more severe symptoms. Often there's a substance abuse issue, and then they'll start to seek treatment at that point.
David, I see you nodding along, and this isn't just a study for you, this is real life for you, right?
Yes, Richard. As a combat medic in the Army, I was trained on how to see it in other people, but I wasn't trained in how to see it in myself. I was a leader, an NCO, so I took care of soldiers. I always put myself last. And what ended up happening was, being a combat medic, you're the soldier's mom, you're their confidant, you're their everything. So you take some of that stuff home as well as the stuff that you're dealing with combat. So you come home, and all of a sudden I found myself where I was detached from my kids. I was having trouble, showing emotion. I had started to isolate myself. And when you're isolating yourself, you find the problem is unique, or at least you think the problem is unique. One thing that Montrose has shown me is that when you're in these groups, when you talk about it, you're no longer this unique person. You realize that there's other people that are suffering like you. And when you can have those conversations in these rooms, and up at Montrose, there's so many people that go the extra mile for you and sit there well past their time that they have to, and have conversations with you, so that when you get all this stuff out, it no longer has that weight that it does. And the one crime about the whole PTSD thing is that, we're told as soldiers to never surrender. We're told as soldiers to be strong. So when you look at mental health, you look at things like that, we consider it a sign of weakness. So we're not going to ask for help. We're going to tell people that, I'm strong, there's nothing wrong with me. So that stigma that you talked about is very real. And I always considered myself a soldier. But with that, we need to understand, and I wish that if there's any vets or combat personnel watching, I wish that they could actually realize that it takes strength to ask for help.
Are we making a mistake that we're asking them to ask for help because of all the things that David articulated and we've seen, in that, look at the numbers. Forget that 20% of returning vets qualify here as suffering from PTSD. We're seeing every other metric, the divorce rates going through the roof, the substance abuse going through the roof, unemployment, guys that can't hold down work, every social metric that you can do, domestic violence, I can go through this, much higher than the general population. Is it a mistake that we're saying, come, there's resources, ask for help? Or when they come home, go through a battery of complete tests until they acknowledge, maybe they don't even view it themselves, you're not ready to move on to the general population just yet?
They do an assessment when they leave. The Department of Defense does it as they leave. And what we do now is when veterans come to the hospital...
If I can interrupt, Doctor, a lot of critics within the psychiatric profession say the mistake that they're doing is they're doing a one-size-fits-all approach. And I even heard this after the Fort Hood shooting, which was the commanding officer said, this wasn't even a combat veteran. And I think it almost missed the point, is that it's not, I think, what we, the lay people here, envision that, hey, if the guy wasn't shot at and the guy wasn't, doesn't come back, as you said, with a physical wound, he must not have PTSD. We've seen so many examples where it doesn't fit that narrow definition.
The definition of PTSD includes exposure to some kind of traumatic, life-threatening experience, or witnessing a horror to somebody else. So it really doesn't require you to have an injury. The VA doesn't look for that necessarily at all. It doesn't even fit the diagnosis. And I don't think we're just asking them to come in. I think what we've been trying to do is educate the veterans. Let them know. We will do, when we're doing medical assessments now, we will assess them for PTSD, for depression, for substance abuse. We will try to identify mental health issues while they're seeking medical treatment so that we can segue them over to treatment. I don't think we're trying to put the burden on the veteran at all. I think what we're trying to do is educate them. There's many of them, they're young, they want to return to their lives, they want to go back to their children or go back to school. They want to put this behind them. But the truth is, you can't put it behind you. You can try to stuff it, you can try to stay busy, you can turn to substance abuse, but eventually the symptoms come and eventually you need treatment.
Though, David, you've heard from other veterans who say, I come back and I feel that I'm just basically thanked for my service and I'm thrown into the deep end of a pool and I'm not ready for what the real world has to offer. People can't relate to my experiences. I've heard folks say at this table, I've been trained not to show weakness, but at the same time, I can't just all of a sudden transition from being in my unit in an intense environment to going back to domestic life. It's like I'm on another planet. People have sat in that chair, have said this, and they feel that they're throwing into the deep end without a life preserver.
Right.
I know the VA has said we're here for you, but explain that disconnect, why people feel that there's not enough help being offered to them while the help and the resources are there.
Okay, in my situation, when I was separated from the military in September 11, 2013, I considered my career very honorable and I left in a dishonorable way. I have an honorable discharge and all that stuff, but when I came out, I was not ready to be a civilian. I was not, I was built to survive and not to live. And that's the problem that most soldiers are having when they're becoming a civilian. You know, they still have that survivor mentality when really they need to start to live. And the problem that we see is that, like I was saying before, the unique, like being in your own hole and self-pity and that unique feeling that you feel that the problem is just your own, that's what needs to go away. And up in Montrose, you have other vets going through the same things, so you can have these conversations. You no longer feel alone. And I just wish that when I got out of the service, instead of like, you know, having all this information thrown at me and being overwhelmed, I was told that hey, report to the Montrose VA, and then go through the process there, you know, because then I'm in my community, I'm near home, I can have a relationship with these people back and forth throughout the rest of my days. Then that transition would be so much better. But since that doesn't happen, what we need to do, or what I feel like I need to do, because Montrose was helped me out tremendously between all the different programs up there, is that if there's vets out there that are watching, they need to understand that it's not a sign of weakness to ask for help.
You're very emotional right now, sitting on the set. Why?
Because of the fact that being a combat medic, I know that there's many soldiers out there that consider themselves men's men and they would never ask for help, and they're out there sick and suffering. And if I could reach any one of those people and to stop their suffering and come and get the help that they desperately need or desperately deserve, then that's what I would love to do.
But Richard, what I don't understand, you have said here tonight clearly you were a medic in the military. If there's ever a profession that should be forced to get counseling before coming out, it is the medic that deals with the wounds and the gunshot wounds of those in war. You see the worst of the worst. So how could they just let you come home without any counseling or training to avoid exactly what you're describing tonight?
But I can't put that blame on the VA or DOD. As a man myself, what I would do would say, I'm okay. I'm a survivor. You know, I must soldier on.
You know, but in many ways, I think we're right here. We just put the nub on it. And I don't think anybody wears a black hat in this situation. And I think that we've made many improvements, you guys on the front lines, from where we were 8 years ago, 10 years ago, to where we are now. And I think that we've learned the hard way. But the idea that it's got to be on you to figure out what you need when you get back, and that you have to ask for it, I think is part of still the challenge right now that we're running into, and how anybody could have ever foreseen what Lopez did in Fort Hood. You know, I defy anyone. But at the same time, this is happening too frequently, and it's too tragic. So obviously, it's getting better. We still have a way to go. But again, I want to thank you for your service, and thank you for all the work that you do, really on the front lines back here at home. Dr. David, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Okay, of course, we'll continue to follow this issue. When we come back after the break, we're going to head out to Austin, Texas, where our own Andrew Whitman is live. The Civil Rights Summit is now in its second day here. We're going to find out what happened. Andrew spoke to some of the champions of the civil rights movement about where in the last 50 years we've come as a country.